When I opened my eyes, the first thing I felt was softness. Sheets beneath my fingertips, the sterile scent of disinfectant, faint beeping. A hospital? The ceiling above me was unfamiliar, white and cracked, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. My body felt weak, heavy, like I'd been crushed under time itself. And pain, a dull ache pulsing at the base of my skull. I tried to sit up, only to groan at the stabbing throb in my ribs. A nurse noticed and rushed to my side, but I waved her off. My reflexes were slower than I remembered. That realization alone sent a chill crawling up my spine. How long was I out? I rasped, voice foreign to my own ears, softer, shakier. The nurse smiled politely. You've been unconscious for 2 days, Mrs. Han. Mrs. Han? I blinked at her, my mind racing. That wasn't my name. I had no husband. No one ever got close enough. Your husband will be here soon, she added, adjusting my IV. Husband? I turned my head slowly toward the window, catching my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back wasn't me. Long black hair, pale face, too pale. Cheekbones slightly sharper, lips fuller. A small beauty mark near the left eye. Familiar, yet not. This wasn't the body I had lived in for over 3 decades. This wasn't me, and yet I was her. That's when the memories hit like a flood, bits and pieces. Red carpet flashes, crowd screaming a name I didn't recognize. A scandal. A wedding dress. A child. Then silence. She had been an actress, a famous one, judging from the images forming in my mind. Headlines blurred in my mind's eye. Ji-yoon's sudden disappearance at the height of her career. Unwed pregnancy scandal. Marriage to business mogul Han Ji-woon under family pressure fell from grace. My fingers trembled. She lived the life I had always dreamed of. Fame, fortune, a family. But the dream was shattered glass now. The door creaked open. He walked in like a winter breeze, sharp, cold, calculated, impeccably dressed in a dark gray suit, tall and expressionless. Eyes that could freeze time met mine. My so-called husband, Han Ji-woon. He stopped at the foot of the bed and said nothing. No concern, no affection, just a blank, assessing stare. You're awake, he finally said, as though I were a burden that had just sat up. I guess I am, I murmured, unsure how to respond to a man I'd never met, but was married to. He didn't sit. He didn't touch me. He merely glanced at his watch. You'll be discharged tomorrow. The driver will be waiting. No, I'm glad you're okay. No warmth, nothing. And that was when I knew. This life, this marriage, it wasn't a haven. It was a prison with silk sheets and icy glances. As he turned to leave, I caught sight of a tiny figure peeking through the door behind him. Big brown eyes, a small bunny plush clutched to his chest. My son. My heart stuttered in my chest. He stared at me like I was a ghost. And in some ways I was, because the woman he remembered, the mother he once knew, she was gone. And I had taken her place. The house was quiet, too quiet for a place that grand. As the car pulled into the driveway, I stared out the tinted window at the cold, sprawling mansion that now belonged to me, at least on paper. White walls, modern glass, and black stone edges. It was beautiful, yes, but not in the way a home should be. It didn't welcome. It loomed. I stepped out of the car, my feet touching the smooth marble path. Ji-woon had already walked ahead without a word. Not even a glance back. A maid opened the door with a polite nod. Welcome home, madam. Home. What a strange word. Home used to be a hideout beneath a rusted warehouse, with weapons lining the walls and loyalty written in blood. Now it was an elegant palace where no one spoke and everyone seemed to be holding their breath. I followed Ji-woon inside. The marble floors echoed with every step. Expensive paintings lined the halls. Not a single photo of us. Not even one of our son. Ji-woon stopped at the base of the stairs. Your room is upstairs, second door on the left. My room? He gave me a look, like I was asking a question with an obvious answer. We haven't shared a room since you left. Right. Because the real Ji-yoon had run away, or broken down, or both. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the hallway. I stood there for a second longer, surrounded by emptiness. The kind of silence that wrapped around your throat and squeezed. I didn't belong here. Not yet, but I would. The room was large, pristine, untouched, like no one had lived in it for months. There was no sign of her in here. No makeup on the vanity, no photos on the nightstand, no clothes in the wardrobe except for a few forgotten pieces. It felt like a room kept ready for someone who might never return. I moved to the window and looked down into the garden. That's when I saw him again. A small figure by the fountain, sitting on the stone edge with his plush bunny held tightly against his chest. My son. Han Seojin. I don't know what I expected. A warm reunion? A child running into my arms? But when I stepped into the garden and called his name gently, he flinched. His wide, tear-rimmed eyes looked up at me like I was a stranger, because to him, I was. Seojin, I whispered, kneeling in front of him. He didn't let me finish. He stood up, clutching his bunny tighter, and took 2 steps back. You're not my mommy, he said, voice trembling. You left me. My heart cracked. I'm sorry, I said softly, though the words felt too small for the pain in his voice. I know I did. I won't do it again. But he shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. I don't believe you. And then he ran into the house, away from me. I stood there, frozen. I was the leader of an underground world. I'd stared death in the face, commanded armies of shadows, and brought kings to their knees. But in that moment, I had never felt so helpless. This child, this tiny soul, was the one thing I couldn't conquer with power. But I would earn his trust. I would fight for it. I would become the mother he needed, the wife Ji-woon once hoped for. Maybe I couldn't fix everything, but I would not be another shadow in this lifeless house. I looked up at the sky, the slinsping behind the clouds. This time, I whispered to myself, I won't run away. The internet is a cruel storyteller. All it took was one search. I sat on the edge of the bed with the tablet resting in my lap, the soft blue light from the screen painting my face in shadow. Every article I read was a stab to the ribs, because this woman, Ji-yoon, had once lived the life of a goddess, only to fall like a cursed star. Nation's sweetheart turned sinner, Ji-yoon's scandal rocks the industry, secret pregnancy confirmed, father unknown. Actress disappears after marriage to Han Ji-woon, CEO of Han Tech Group. There were pages of them, photos from red carpets, interviews, clips of her laughing brightly on variety shows. Then it all shifted. Grainy paparazzi photos, her swollen belly hidden behind designer coats, a rushed wedding with no smiles. Her face was drawn, tired, haunted. I clenched the edge of the tablet, scrolling with growing dread. She was 24 when it happened, at the height of her career. She had been involved with a director, older, married. The affair was quiet until it wasn't. When the pregnancy leaked, the man disappeared. She was left to drown alone in judgment and disgrace. And then came the wedding. Not to the father. No, to Han Ji-woon, the man with a reputation colder than winter steel. Rumors said it was an arrangement, a family cover-up, a trade of shame for silence, a gilded prison. I tossed the tablet aside and stood. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. There was more to this. I could feel it in my bones. I found the drawer locked at the bottom of her wardrobe. A small click of a pin, and it gave way easily. Inside, I found a bundle of papers, old letters, receipts. At the very bottom, tucked beneath the lining, a journal, black leather, scuffed at the edges. I opened it slowly, flipping past pages of rehearsals and scripts, until her handwriting changed. Messier, angrier, sadder. They said I ruined my life. Maybe they're right. He doesn't look at me. Ji-woon only speaks when necessary, like every word is an obligation. He didn't want this child. Hell, neither did I at first. Some days I stare at Seojin in his crib and feel nothing. Not love, not anger, just numb, like I'm made of frost. I hate myself. What kind of mother can't hold her own child without feeling like she's shattering? The world already hates me. Maybe I deserve it. I sank to the floor, gripping the book tightly, my vision blurring. Postpartum depression, shame, isolation, no support, no kindness. She wasn't evil. She was drowning, and she had no one to pull her out. I thought I'd inherited a peaceful life, a family, a child, but I'd inherited pain, a broken home, a son who looked at me like a stranger, a husband who never loved the woman whose body I now wore. Still, one truth remained. She might have made mistakes, but I wouldn't make the same ones. I wouldn't be absent. I wouldn't disappear again. I'm sorry, I whispered into the silence, not just to her but to the boy down the hall. You were never the monster they painted you to be, and I would prove it. Not for her reputation, but for Seojin, and for myself. Children are sharper than adults think. They can smell guilt, sense discomfort, see right through a smile stitched on too tight. I stood outside Seojin's, no, Haoran's bedroom door for 5 full minutes, my hand raised in a hesitant knock. I'd rehearsed 1,000 things in my head, jokes, apologies, explanations he wouldn't understand, but in the end all I did was knock once, softly. No answer. I turned the knob and peeked inside. The room was a little boy's universe, walls painted with stars and planets, toys scattered in calculated chaos, and a nightlight shaped like a rocket glowing faintly in the corner. And there he was, sitting cross-legged on a rug, building something with blocks. A bunny plush was tucked protectively under his arm. He looked up at me with that same cautious expression, the one that said, "Don't come any closer unless you mean it." I stepped in anyway. "Hey," I said gently, "can I sit with you?" He didn't answer, but he didn't tell me to leave either. I took that as a maybe and sat cross-legged across from him, leaving enough space so I wouldn't feel like an intruder. He went back to his blocks, meticulously building what looked like a robot with a missing leg. "I used to like building things too," I said after a while. "I once made a tower taller than me out of books. It collapsed on my foot. Hurt for days." Still no response. But his fingers paused for a second, then resumed. Progress. I watched him work in silence, resisting every urge to reach out or ask too many questions. This wasn't a mission I could rush. It required stillness, observation, patience. I'd spent years studying targets, reading expressions, memorizing their rhythms, and Hauron was a puzzle I had no blueprint for. "You don't talk like Mommy," he said suddenly without looking up. That caught me off guard. "No," he shook his head. "She was tired a lot and angry and sad, and then gone. Gone." That word clung to the walls like smoke. "I'm trying," I said quietly, "to be better than she was. I don't want to leave again." He glanced at me, really looked this time. "Are you still sad?" I opened my mouth and froze. I was sad, yes, but not in the same way she had been. My sadness was rooted in guilt, in the weight of someone else's choices, and in the overwhelming need to fix what I hadn't broken. "I'm healing," I said finally. "It takes time." Hauron stared at me for another beat before nudging one of his robot's arms toward me. "You can help," he muttered. And just like that, I was invited into his world. I picked up a block and started building, piece by piece, like we were stitching something new together in silence. Later that night, I found Jawoon standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall near the stairs. "You were with him," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "We were building a robot. It only has one eye and 3 arms, but he says it's perfect." His brow furrowed. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. He looked at me like I was someone unfamiliar, wearing a too familiar face. "You've changed," he said at last. "Maybe," I replied. "Maybe I just became who Ji-Yun should have been all along." He didn't argue, but he didn't accept it either. "Don't give him hope if you're going to disappear again," he said, turning away. I watched him walk down the hall, his figure swallowed by shadows. "I won't," I whispered to no one. "Not again." Love, I've learned, doesn't always arrive with fireworks and sweeping music. Sometimes it comes quietly, draped in the scent of burnt rice and the ache in your lower back after hours spent trying to fold laundry the right way. The assassin I used to be, she would have scoffed at this version of me. But I'm not her anymore. At least I don't want to be. The first time I tried to cook breakfast for Hauron, the rice came out half-cooked and the egg was more shell than yolk. He stared at the plate, then looked up at me with a blink. "Are we poor now?" he asked seriously. I laughed. Actually laughed. It startled both of us. "No," I said, "but we might be if we keep wasting groceries like this." He grinned. It was small, fleeting, but it was real. So I tried again. Every morning after that, I woke up early, studied cooking tutorials like they were classified intel, burned my fingers more than once, cut myself on a peeler, cried into a pot of soup when the salt fell in like betrayal, but I never stopped trying. And each time I placed a plate in front of Hauron and he didn't wrinkle his nose, it felt like winning a silent war. One morning, as I stirred congee at the stove, Liu Ji, our longtime housekeeper, stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes sharp. I could tell she didn't trust me. Not yet. "You've never stepped foot in this kitchen before," she said flatly. "I'm trying to change." She raised a brow. "Change happens slowly, with bruised hands and burnt pots. I hope you're not just playing house." "I'm not," I said more firmly than I intended. "This isn't a role. I want to be someone Hauron can depend on, someone he can love without being afraid I'll disappear again." Liu Ji didn't speak for a long time. Then, quietly, she stepped beside me and adjusted the flame. "Congee needs patience. Let it breathe." And just like that, she started showing me things. How to wrap dumplings without them falling apart. How to tell when soup needs more ginger. how to cut vegetables without slicing your soul in the process. She still scolded me, of course, but there was less ice in her voice, more reluctant warmth. At dinner one night, Howran looked at his plate, then at me. It tastes like something Gong Gong used to make. I blinked. Is that a good thing? He nodded solemnly. Gong Gong never messed up eggs. Liu Shi snorted from the kitchen. Later that night, I caught Jiwoon standing in the hallway, watching me dry dishes with Liu Ji. His eyes didn't have the same frost in them anymore. He looked confused, like he was seeing a stranger wear Ji-yun's face, but not quite in a bad way. What? I asked, drying my hands. He hesitated. You used to call the kitchen a prison. I smiled, tired but proud. I guess I'm serving time. He didn't smile back, but he didn't walk away either. Something was shifting between us, slowly, carefully. Maybe this is how love is relearned, not through grand confessions or tearful apologies, but through small, stubborn acts of care. One spoonful of soup at a time. They say the public has a short memory, but when it comes to disgraced women, their memories are endless. The headlines hit me like bullets the morning after I went out with Howran for a simple walk around the neighborhood. I didn't think anyone would care. I was wrong. Ji-yun crawls out of hiding, motherhood makeover or PR stunt. From red carpet to diapers, the actress who fell from grace. Who let the witch back in? Even Liu Ji's fingers trembled when she handed me the morning paper. Jiwoon didn't say a word, just pushed his coffee away and left the room. Howran looked up from his cereal, confused but quiet, sensing the tension in the air like a child always does. I should have expected it. Ji-yun had been a rising star, adored and envied. Then came the scandal. The pregnancy, the marriage, the disappearance. People weren't going to forgive so easily, especially when they never really knew the truth. But I wasn't prepared for the interview request. It came from a woman named Lin Maya, a respected journalist known for her no-nonsense approach. Liu Ji advised me not to go. Jiwoon didn't even pretend to care, but Howran, he hugged me that night and whispered, "Don't let them be mean to you." So I said yes. I wore something simple, no designer brands, no false glamour, just a white blouse and a soft blue skirt. I even did my own makeup, shaky hands and all. The studio lights were harsh. Maya was harsher. You vanished at the peak of your career. Why return now? I didn't flinch, because I finally want to stop running. Running from what? Shame? Responsibility? The truth? I smiled, a small, tired one. Running from myself. From a version of me who couldn't bear to face the consequences of my choices. She blinked. I wasn't ready to be a mother when Howran came into my life, I admitted. I thought I had to hide it to survive in this world, but the truth is, I failed him. I wasn't strong enough, but I want to be, now. So this isn't about image repair, she challenged. No, this is about a little boy who deserves a mother who fights to be better. Not for fame, not for redemption, but for him. There was silence, the kind that hangs heavy. And when the interview aired the next day, I braced for blood. But something strange happened. The headlines shifted, just a little. Ji-yun speaks, a flawed mother or a woman trying again. Not a comeback, but a confession. Ji-yun breaks her silence. Maybe we were too quick to judge. Of course, not everyone was kind. The internet never is, but in between the hate, there were cracks of empathy. People who said, I know what postpartum feels like, or I had a mother like that. I wish she'd come back to try. Even Jiwoon paused at the doorway that night, eyes unreadable. You spoke well. I wasn't acting, I said. He nodded once, then left. I didn't need applause. I didn't need approval. All I wanted was for Howran to look at me one day and say, you stayed. That's the only review that matters. Jiwoon has always looked at me the way one might regard a broken mirror. Cautiously, coldly, and never for too long. But lately I've noticed he lingers, not long. Not enough for anyone else to notice, just enough for me to feel the shift in the air when he passes by. His eyes, always sharp and unreadable, sometimes pause on my hands when I'm folding Howran's laundry or on the back of my head when I'm reading a story aloud in the living room. This morning, I caught him watching me in the kitchen doorway. I was struggling with breakfast, toast burnt, eggs a little too salty. Howran still ate everything with a smile, his little fingers tapping the table in rhythm. I was laughing, genuinely laughing at the sight of his yolk-covered chin when I felt it. A weight, a heat, a presence. I turned. Jiwoon stood there silent. He didn't say a word, just stared at me. Or maybe through me. I couldn't tell. Do you want coffee? I asked gently. His brow furrowed. You're different. I froze. I don't know what game you're playing, Ji-yun, he said slowly, walking into the room, but this new act, it's almost convincing. It's not an act, I replied. He scoffed. Right. The cruel, selfish woman I married has suddenly decided she's a mother of the year? I swallowed hard. I'm not her anymore. Delusional, he muttered under his breath. Maybe I was. But I no longer had the heart of a cold-blooded killer, nor the hollow emptiness that Ji-yun once carried in her eyes. All I had now was the ache to be better. For Howran, for myself, even for the man in front of me who didn't believe me. I'm trying, I whispered. I know it's not enough, and maybe it never will be, but I'm not pretending. I just want to fix what I can. He didn't reply. Just looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like a breath longer than usual. Then he turned away. But he didn't slam the door. He didn't say something cruel just to wound. He didn't ignore me, and that was new. That night, I heard his footsteps in the hallway. Slower. Hesitating outside my door before moving on, a glance, a pause, a moment, that's all it was. But in a life where I've been called a demon, a witch, a monster, a moment of softness from Ji-woon felt like a miracle. I never expected my past to haunt me quite so literally. The letter arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. The kind of morning that trickles into the house with soft sunlight and the scent of fresh flowers outside, as if the world itself had forgotten that someone like me existed. But that wasn't the case. Not anymore. I noticed it on the kitchen counter. A single envelope sealed with wax marked with a symbol I hadn't seen in years. The emblem of the Black Lotus, a symbol I'd worn with pride back when I had blood on my hands and no conscience to speak of. Back when I was a leader, not a mother. It was the same emblem that once marked my identity, my purpose, my life. The assassin's mark. I froze. The noise around me, Howran's giggle as he stacked his cereal bowl and Liu Ji's gentle humming as she cleaned, faded away. The world narrowed to just that envelope. Ji-yun? Liu Ji called from the doorway, her voice pulling me back to the present. I turned slowly, forcing a smile. I'm fine, just lost in thought. But she could tell something was wrong. I could feel her eyes on me as I wiped my hands on the dish towel and grabbed the letter. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. I could feel the weight of it in my bones. I peeled back the seal. The paper inside was thick, luxurious, just like the old days. Inside, written in a hand I would recognize anywhere, were the words, "Return or face the consequences." I let the letter fall from my fingers, but I didn't let it go completely. It dangled between my fingers like a noose. It was a warning, a threat. Someone knew I was still alive. I wanted to burn the letter, tear it to shreds, forget about it, like I'd forgotten about all the other parts of my past. But I couldn't, not this time. They knew, and they were coming. I could feel it in my bones. The life I thought I had escaped, the life I thought I had buried so deep in the ground, it wasn't done with me yet. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the letter a cold weight in my hand. Howran's voice drifted back to me, unaware of the storm that had just entered my life once again. "Mom?" Howran called from the other room, his small voice breaking the tension. "Are you okay?" I forced myself to smile, to tuck the letter out of sight, pretending that the storm in my chest hadn't started to whirl. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Just fine. But I wasn't fine. Not at all. Fitness. That's the excuse I gave. It sounded harmless enough, a woman with a child trying to get back into shape. It made sense. I told Liu Ji and Ji-woon that I'd signed up for a few self-defense classes at a local gym to get my energy back, to feel less like a stranger in my own skin. But that wasn't the truth. Not really. I hadn't lost the instincts, the muscle memory, the reflexes that had once been honed on dark streets and colder nights. I never truly forgot what I'd learned from years of survival, from being the leader of the Black Lotus. They were buried deep inside, hidden beneath layers of motherhood, guilt, and fear. But they were still there, just waiting for the right moment to resurface. And the moment came. It was a Tuesday evening. The parking lot outside the gym was dim, the kind of quiet where you could hear your own breath and nothing else. I was walking to my car, sweat still dripping from my forehead as I checked my phone, mentally planning out dinner. Something about the peacefulness of it made me forget. I didn't hear him until he was too close, the man who'd been following me. His footsteps were silent, his shadow a blur until he reached for me. his hand grabbing my wrist with the kind of roughness that said he had no intention of letting go. Fear, panic, instinct, all those things should have surged within me, but instead there was something colder, something far more calculated. Without thinking, I stepped back, twisted my wrist just enough to break his grip, and shifted my body into a defensive stance. My feet moved with ease, my mind already calculating the best way to disarm him, to leave him with no choice but to retreat. He came at me again, more desperate this time, swinging a knife, or something sharp. I don't remember the exact moment it happened, but I was already moving, my hands faster than his eyes. I grabbed his wrist, twisted it, and then, with a quick flick of my elbow, drove my knee into his side. It was clean, quiet, efficient, just like I had been trained all those years ago. No wasted motion, no unnecessary force. He crumpled to the ground, groaning, clutching his side, the knife now several feet away from him. I stepped back, breathing evenly, my heart still steady. My hand lingered by my side, the same hand that had once wielded knives and poison without hesitation, the same hand that had signed orders for deaths without blinking. And now it was still. Not for a kill, not for violence, but it was still the same hand. I glanced at him once, making sure he wasn't going to try anything else. He wasn't. He was on the ground, helpless. Not the first man I'd left like that, not the last either, I suspected. I didn't call the police. I didn't need to. His injuries weren't severe, and he wouldn't risk pressing charges, not when his real reason for being there was obvious. The Black Lotus wasn't a name you just dropped in casual conversation. With a deep breath, I straightened my clothes, wiped the sweat from my brow, and slid into my car. I didn't look back. I didn't even flinch when my hands clenched around the steering wheel. I was still the woman who had once ruled over shadows and whispers. The poison that had once flowed in my veins hadn't disappeared. It was still there, waiting for the moment it was needed. And that moment had come. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. Just a weekend trip. A chance for Howran to spend some time outside the house, to see the world beyond the four walls we'd been confined to for too long. Jiwoon had agreed to it so easily that I almost wondered if he'd planned it for weeks. It wasn't like him to be spontaneous, but Howran had been asking for days. And maybe, just maybe, Jiwoon had been listening. We went to a cabin up in the mountains. The kind of place where the air smells fresh and the sky feels like it's so close you could reach up and touch it. I had never been here before. Not as Ji-Yun, not in any of the lives I'd lived before now. But it was peaceful, the kind of peace I hadn't realized I craved. Howran was thrilled, of course. He ran ahead, jumping through the tall grass, his laughter carrying through the air like music. I watched him for a moment, smiling at how carefree he was. He had no idea what kind of world he'd been born into. He had no idea how much his mother had changed. But I knew. And for the first time in a long while, I thought maybe I could do this. Maybe I could be the mother he deserved. Jiwoon stood beside me, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't as animated as Howran, but there was a softness to his expression as he watched our son run through the field. It wasn't much, just a slight change in his eyes, a subtle shift in his posture, but it was enough for me to notice. "Looks like he's enjoying himself," I said, breaking the silence. "Yeah," Jiwoon replied, his voice low. "He's been cooped up for too long." I nodded. "I know, I've been meaning to take him out more, show him different things." He glanced at me then, his eyes meeting mine with a quiet intensity that made my heart flutter unexpectedly. "You're doing fine," he said. "Better than I ever thought you would." His words weren't kind in the way that most people would consider kind. There was no softening of the truth, no sugarcoating, but in that moment it felt like he was giving me something important, something rare. Before I could respond, Howran shouted from the distance, "Mom! Dad! Look at me!" We turned to see him standing on top of a large rock, arms spread wide, grinning from ear to ear. He looked like he'd just conquered the world. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound coming out more freely than it had in months. "Careful, Howran," I called, trying to rein in my protective instincts. "Don't fall!" But Jiwoon just smiled, a small, rare smile that softened the hard edges of his usual expression. "Let him enjoy himself," he said quietly. I hesitated. There was something in his tone, something unspoken, that made my chest tighten. For a moment, it felt like we were more than just two people pretending to coexist, like we were a family, like we were finally becoming one. I turned back to Howran, watching him jump down from the rock and run toward us. He was laughing again, his face flushed with excitement. But when I looked at Jiwoon, I saw something else in his eyes. Something warm. Something dangerous. And then it happened. In that fleeting moment, just as Howran was nearly to us, Jiwoon stepped closer. Too close. Our bodies were only inches apart, the space between us filled with a quiet tension, the kind that had been building since the day I returned. I could feel the heat of his body, the rhythm of his breath. My heart beat faster, and I knew it wasn't just the proximity that made my pulse race. It was something deeper, something that had been buried beneath layers of resentment and pain. His gaze dropped to my lips, and I almost held my breath, afraid of what would happen next. I wasn't sure if I wanted to kiss him or run away. My body betrayed me, leaning in just slightly, only to be interrupted by Howran's voice. "Mom! Dad! Let's go get ice cream!" Howran called, his wide grin dragging us both back to reality. I stepped back, breathless, as though waking from a dream I didn't realize I'd been in. Jiwoon cleared his throat and turned away, his usual cool mask slipping back into place. "Yeah, ice cream. Let's go." I followed them, my feet heavy with the weight of what had just almost happened. Was I ready for that? Ready for this family to be more than just a hollow shell of what it used to be? Maybe, maybe not. But in that brief, stolen moment, I could almost imagine it. And that was enough. It was supposed to be a simple morning. The sun was barely rising, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange, and Howran had already bounced out of bed, eager to start the day. I hadn't planned for anything extraordinary, just the usual routine. Breakfast, a quick check on Howran's schoolwork, maybe some time for myself. I had the sense that I was finally getting the hang of things. The domestic life. The normal life, if such a thing even existed for me. But then it happened. We were in the car, heading to his school, the quiet hum of the engine filling the space between us. Howran was chattering about some new toy he wanted, something he had seen in a store window the day before. I was only half listening, smiling absently as I drove, when everything suddenly went wrong. A screech of tires, a flash of movement. I turned just in time to see a car swerving straight toward us. I didn't have time to think. My hands moved on instinct, slamming the brakes, swerving the wheel to the side. The car jerked violently, the screech of metal grinding against asphalt filling my ears. For a split second, everything seemed to move in slow motion. The blinding headlights, the terror in Howran's eyes, the crunch of impact. And then, silence. The car came to a halt, the tires skidding to a stop, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked over at Howran, my mind still trying to process what had just happened. "Howran?" I called, my voice frantic, as I reached across the seat to check on him. He was staring at me, his face pale, his lips trembling, but he was fine. He was safe. It was me who was shaking now, the adrenaline surging through my veins, my breath ragged. I tried to keep my cool, tried to make sure Howran was unharmed, but deep down I knew what this was. It wasn't an accident. It couldn't have been. I'd spent enough years in the shadows of the underground to recognize a warning when I saw one. The car hadn't been some random driver losing control. No, it had deliberate. The screech of the tires, the sudden approach, all of it had been too precise, too calculated. I glanced out of the rearview mirror, scanning the street, but the car that had almost hit us was gone, vanished into the morning fog, leaving nothing behind but a trail of panic in its wake. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. Howran nodded, his small frame shaking with fear. "I'm fine, Mom." I forced a smile, trying to mask my unease, trying to pretend this wasn't happening. But I could feel it. The weight of what was coming, the heavy presence of someone from my past, someone who knew exactly where I was, someone who would stop at nothing to drag me back into the darkness. "Mom, what happened?" Howran's voice was small, confused, and it broke through my haze. I looked at him, trying to steady myself, to find the right words. "It's nothing, Howran, just a little scare," I lied, my voice steadier than I felt. But even as I said the words, my mind was already racing. The car, the near miss, the feeling of being watched, it all pointed to one person, Yolan. I had known this day would come. I had hoped it wouldn't, but I should have known better. Yolan, the shadow that haunted my every step. The person who had once been my mentor, my ally, before turning on me. The one who had always been there, lurking in the background, waiting for the moment to strike. And now she had made her move. It was clear now. She was here. She knew I was alive. She was reminding me that I could never truly escape my past, that no matter how far I ran, no matter how I tried to build a new life, she would always find me. The question wasn't whether she would come for me. She already had. The question was whether I would run again, hide from her like I had before, or stand my ground and face her. I had spent years building this life. I had finally found something worth living for, Hauran, this fragile little family. Could I really throw it all away? Could I go back to the shadows, back to the life I had sworn I was done with? I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, feeling the cold steel beneath my fingers. There was no easy answer, but I knew one thing for certain. Yulan was not going to stop until she had me back. And if I was going to protect Hauran, if I was going to protect what I had started to build, then I couldn't afford to run anymore. I had to fight. The evening air was thick with tension, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. I stood at the edge of the abandoned warehouse, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. It had been years since I had been in a place like this, a place where the shadows seemed to swallow everything. But I knew this building. I knew its cold walls, its broken windows, the familiar scent of dust and decay. This was where it all started, where I had been trained, where I had learned the ways of the assassin, where I had been molded into the person I had once been. And now, here I was again, standing on the threshold of my past. Yulan had called me here. She knew where I would be. She always did. It was her way, the way of someone who had once been as close as family to me. But that bond had been shattered long ago when she turned against me. Now, she was the last person I wanted to see. But I had no choice. I couldn't run anymore. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. I stiffened, instinctively falling into the stance that had been drilled into me countless times. I had to be ready, ready for anything. And then she appeared, Yulan, the woman I had once trusted, the woman who had trained me. But now, standing before me, she was nothing more than an enemy. She looked unchanged, as if time had never touched her. Her dark eyes gleamed with that familiar, dangerous spark. Well, look who decided to show up. Yulan's voice was cold, mocking. I must admit, I didn't expect you to come. I thought you would cower, hide behind that pathetic little family of yours. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence between us spoke volumes. She took a step closer, her gaze never leaving mine. I'm impressed. You've lasted longer than I thought, but let's see how long you can keep pretending to be someone you're not. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving something. To myself, to her, to everyone who thought they could control me. I'm not pretending, I said quietly, the words coming out more forcefully than I intended. I'm not who I was. I'm not the demoness, the witch, or the assassin you trained. I'm someone else now. A mother. Yulan snorted, her lips curling into a sneer. A mother? Please, you'll always be the monster you were. There's no escaping that. Her words stung, but I couldn't let her get to me. Not now. Not when I had come so far. I took another step forward, my movements calm but purposeful. We both know that's not true. Without another word, the fight began. I moved swiftly, almost instinctively, the years of training kicking in as I dodged her attacks and countered with my own. She was fast, but I was faster. My body moved with precision, every move calculated, every strike aimed at disabling her, not killing her. I had to be careful. I wasn't the person I used to be. It didn't take long before I had her pinned to the ground, her arms restrained. She struggled beneath me, but I could see the frustration in her eyes. She had underestimated me. She had thought I was weak, thought I had lost my edge. But I hadn't. Why did you come back? I asked, my voice steady, almost gentle. What do you want from me? Yulan gritted her teeth, glaring up at me. You think you've won, don't you, son? You think you can escape your past, your destiny? But you're wrong. You'll always be one of us. And one day the world will come calling again. Her words were a chilling reminder of the truth. I could never fully escape my past, no matter how much I wanted to. But I wasn't the same person who had walked into this warehouse all those years ago, and I wasn't going to let her pull me back into that life. Not for her, not for anyone. I stood, releasing her from my hold. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing on me, but I made my choice. I'm done, I said softly, my voice steady. I don't need this life anymore. I don't need you. Yulan struggled to her feet, her eyes burning with rage. You think you can just walk away from everything we were? You think you can leave all of this behind? I don't have to fight anymore, I replied, my voice firm. I've found something worth living for. Yulan's lips curled into a smirk, though it was tinged with bitterness. You're wrong. You'll never escape. Not really. She took a step back, her eyes never leaving mine. Remember this, Ji-yun. I will find you again, and when I do, you won't have anyone to protect you. And with that, she disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone in the cold warehouse. I stood there for a long moment, my breath heavy in my chest, my heart racing. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. Yulan was right about one thing. I couldn't outrun my past forever. But I wasn't the same person who had walked into this life all those years ago. I had something now that I would fight to protect. I had Hauran, and for him, I would face anything, even if it meant facing the demons of my past. I hadn't meant to leave it out in the open. The journal with all of my fears, my uncertainties, my raw thoughts lay there, abandoned on the desk, as if calling out for someone to pick it up, to see the woman behind the mask I'd carefully crafted, the woman who wasn't the Demoness, the woman who was just trying to be good enough. I hadn't expected him to find it. But then again, I should have known. Jiwoon always noticed the smallest things. He wasn't a man who missed details. It wasn't until later that evening, after Hauran had gone to bed, that I saw him standing by the desk, his back turned to me as he stared down at the open pages of my journal. His posture was stiff, his fingers gripping the edges of the paper, as if afraid it might slip away from him. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could feel the weight of his gaze on my back, even though I didn't turn to face him. What had he read? What had he discovered? Ji-woon, I said, my voice hoarse, unsure. I didn't mean for you to. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was low, tight, as he turned to face me, his brow furrowed in confusion. There was no anger in his tone, only something more unsettling, concern, or maybe fear. I didn't know how to explain. How could I put into words the swirling chaos inside me? How could I make him understand that everything I had written in that journal wasn't just about the past, but about the present? About my struggle to become something I never thought I could be, a wife, a mother. I didn't want to burden you, I whispered, feeling a lump rise in my throat. The words sounded weak even to me. I didn't want you to see me like that. He stepped forward, closing the distance between us, his eyes scanning my face as if searching for something. An answer, perhaps, or a glimpse of the person behind the walls I had carefully built. You've been carrying this all alone, haven't you? All this time, you've been pretending like nothing's wrong, like you're fine. But I see it now. I see you, and you're not fine. I swallowed hard, trying to keep the tears at bay. I never wanted to be this person. I never wanted to fall into this life, but I don't know how to be anything else. He exhaled sharply, the tension leaving his body as he placed the journal down on the desk and stepped closer to me. You've been trying so hard to be someone you're not, trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, but I don't need you to be perfect. I looked up at him, my heart thudding in my chest. What do you need from me then? Just you, he said quietly, his hand brushing my cheek. I don't need the demoness or the assassin. I need the woman who's trying her best, who's struggling just like I am. I need the woman who's been there for Hauran, the woman who's been changing. His words were gentle, but they struck me with the force of a thunderclap. I had never expected this from him, not after everything, not after all the years of distance between us, not after everything I had done to push him away. I could feel the crack in my armor, the walls I had built slowly crumbling as I stood there exposed. And then, without warning, he reached for me. His hands cupped my face gently, his eyes searching mine, as if he was trying to figure me out, to see me for who I truly was. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way I started seeing you differently. I don't know if it's because of Hauran or because of how much you've changed, but I'm starting to feel something I haven't felt in a long time, something that scares me. I blinked at him, my chest tightening. What do you mean? He took a deep breath, his eyes softening with uncertainty. I think I'm starting to fall in love with you, Ji-yun. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile, as if neither of us were sure what to make of them. But I couldn't deny the warmth spreading through my chest, the feeling that had been quietly growing between us for weeks now. I had never imagined this, that Ji-woon, the cold, distant man who had married me out of obligation, might actually feel something for me. Not just for the woman who had been trapped in a loveless marriage, but for me, the woman I was becoming. I started, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? How could I respond to something so unexpected, so raw? You don't have to say anything, he interrupted, his voice gentle. I just wanted you to know. I don't know what this means for us, but I want to try. And just like that, I realized that I was no longer just playing a part. This wasn't some act for survival. This wasn't some pretend life that I had created to protect myself. This was real. I want to try too, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He leaned in then, his forehead resting gently against mine, and for a moment the world outside disappeared. There were no expectations, no roles to play. There was just the two of us, standing on the edge of something new, something fragile, but full of possibility. It was terrifying. But it was also exactly what I had been searching for all this time. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking out over a vast ocean of uncertainty. The winds were wild, the waves crashing below, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. There was something exhilarating in the unknown, in the fresh start that was beginning to unfold before me. Ji-woon had said it, his words still echoing in my mind. Let's start again, this time, for real. It wasn't just a casual suggestion. It was a proposal to leave behind the lies, the forced roles, the years of emotional distance. He wanted to start fresh. He wanted us to try again. Not for appearances, not for the world to see, but for us. And I knew in that moment that I wanted to try too. I stood in front of the mirror, running my fingers over the delicate fabric of the dress he had picked out. It was simple but elegant, nothing like the grand gowns I used to wear on the red carpet. There was no fanfare, no flashy photographers, no pressure to live up to an image. This time, it was just about me and Ji-woon. Just about the two of us, trying to make something real out of the mess we had made. I could hardly recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. The reflection wasn't the cold, distant wife who had been thrust into an impossible situation. It wasn't the assassin with blood on her hands. No, the woman looking at me now was someone softer. Someone who was willing to forgive herself, to love again. Someone who could be a mother, a wife, and still keep a piece of herself intact. Are you ready? Ji-woon's voice came from behind me, breaking through my thoughts. He was standing at the door, his eyes warm but anxious, as if he was afraid I might back out. I turned to face him, and in that moment, all the words I had been struggling to find, the explanations, the excuses, the guilt, faded away. All that remained was the truth of who we were becoming. I'm ready, I said quietly, my heart pounding in my chest. He smiled, but it wasn't the cold, guarded smile I had seen so many times. This was different. It was soft, genuine, full of hope. Then let's do this, he said, holding out his hand. I walked toward him, my footsteps lighter than they had been in a long time, and placed my hand in his. His grip was firm, comforting, a steady anchor in the storm of everything we had been through. As we made our way to the small ceremony room we had arranged, the silence between us felt full of unspoken promises. It wasn't the lavish wedding I had imagined once upon a time, but it was exactly what I needed. A simple vow, a fresh start, a commitment to each other, not as roles, not as labels, but as two people who were willing to grow together. I, Ji-yun, Ji-woon began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, promise to love and cherish you, not because of what the world expects, but because I've come to see you for who you truly are. I'll stand by you, not just as a husband, but as a partner in everything. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling slightly as I spoke the words I never thought I'd say. I, Ji-yun, I repeated, meeting his gaze, promise to love you, not for what you've done for me, but for who you are. I'll stand by you, not just as a wife, but as your equal, your support. We exchanged vows, our words simple but sincere, free from the pressure of public expectation. We didn't need the world to see us. We didn't even need anyone to know. All we needed was this moment. And as I looked into Jiwoon's eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. A future. A future where we were more than just a broken marriage, more than just a man and a woman who had been lost in their own pain. This time, we were building something real. Something that wasn't based on obligation or image, but on love. "I love you," Jiwoon whispered, his voice filled with tenderness. My heart skipped a beat. "I love you too." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. The flashing lights of the cameras hit me from all sides, blinding in their intensity. The roar of the crowd faded into a dull hum as I focused on the feeling of Jiwoon's hand at the small of my back, steady and supportive. Hauran was at my side, his tiny hand gripping mine with a shy but firm determination. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The glittering world around me no longer had the power to control me. This was my choice, my path. I wasn't the woman they had once known as the heiress to an underground empire. I wasn't the infamous assassin feared by many. I wasn't even the starlet they had once adored, only to see fade into scandal. I was something new. The crowd parted as we made our way down the red carpet. I felt the familiar, probing stares of the press, their hungry eyes capturing every moment. I had lived for years under the weight of their expectations. But tonight, I felt different. Tonight, I didn't care what they saw. I knew who I was. Jiwoon's presence beside me, warm and unwavering, anchored me in the chaos. Hauran, his innocent face glowing in the spotlight, tugged at my hand and smiled up at me. His eyes were full of wonder, and I realized in that moment that this was what I had fought for. Not fame, not revenge, not even redemption, but this small, quiet moment of peace. When we reached the press line, a reporter stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Ji-yun," she began, her voice loud and eager. "Your comeback is something the world has been waiting for. But after all that's happened, how does it feel to return to the public eye? How do you feel about the name Ji-yun and what you've become?" The question hung in the air, a heavy weight I had to carry. For years, I had been haunted by the different versions of myself. The demoness, the wicked witch, the heiress. The woman who had been both praised and condemned by the world. Each name, each label had defined me for so long. But now as I looked at Jiwoon, his steady gaze never leaving mine, and at Hauran, his small fingers wrapped around mine with trust and love, I realized there was only one name that truly mattered. I smiled softly, the weight of the years lifting from my shoulders as I spoke into the microphone, my voice steady but filled with the calm certainty I had fought so hard to find. "I've been known by many names," I said, feeling each word settle into my chest. "But the name I'm proudest of is Mother." The reporter's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the simplicity of my response, but there was nothing more to say. The name I had once run from, the name I had never thought I would have the privilege of claiming, was the one that had shaped me into who I was today. A mother. A woman who had learned that love, not power, not fame, not fear, was what truly made someone strong. And with Jiwoon at my side, Hauran holding my hand, I knew that no matter what happened next, I had already won. The rest of the world could call me whatever they wanted. I had finally found a name that was all my own,